Hello and welcome to another episode of Literary Gladiators, the show where we discuss and debate literature in all of its forms. If it's written work, it's game. Let's meet the panel.
Hi, I'm Larry.
Hi, I'm Jesi.
I'm Ari.
And I'm Josh. And Jesi, it is so nice to have you back from Virginia.
Hooray!
I love coming to visit you guys. I don't mind it at all.
Well, welcome back anyway.
It'll be great to have you on for the next 5 weeks.
Yay. 5 whole weeks away from home.
Yeah, how does that work? In TV time, right? Jen?
Yep, in the world of TV time, we are keeping Jesi here for 5 weeks.
Yes, in this library.
Same
YouTube
outfit.
time. YouTube Standard Time. YST.
The same outfit.
We're going to be
and
going over...
everything.
Yep, we don't change for 5 weeks.
No. We find outfits
That's
and
what
we
all
stick
this.
to them.
That's what the sweat is for. That's why. Yeah.
We're going to be going over an Agatha Christie book, one that Ari selected, and that is The Clocks. Ari, you have a discussion starter?
I do. The Clocks was a later novel. I mean, we've already been over, and then there were none. We've been over Murder of Roger Ackroyd, both of which were written in the 40s. This is a much later Agatha Christie novel, which came out in 1963. So this is, she's older, she's wiser, she's got more experience under her belt in writing mysteries. So, comparing to the fact that the other mysteries we did were in the 40s, this one's much later, this one's in the 60s. Do you feel like there's any difference in the way she approached this mystery compared to some of her earlier works?
I think that Agatha Christie seems to take many approaches, some of which come from the point of view of Poirot, and some do not. And in this case, he barely has a role. I think maybe 20%, 25%.
So the way this works is that it's supposed to be in order, chronological order of Poirot's life, with the exception of his last book, which she had already written and then didn't release till she died. Poirot at this point is way older than he was in the 40s books, so he isn't he's not an active detective anymore like he was before. Now he's
more of a consultant.
Yeah, he's getting help from people like Inspector Hardcastle and Colin Lamb. Well, Colin Lamb is only for this book. I think Hardcastle's been in other books, but he's getting help from other people to be able to investigate. And if you notice, it seems a lot more casual than it was back in Ackroyd or in and then there were none.
Was Hardcastle in books before?
Well, and then there were none. Poirot wasn't in that. But
did Hardcastle appear in? Did he appear in books before this one?
I think I don't know. Actually, he might actually only be in this book. I think there's usually someone. There is an inspector though. Usually.
Because
it may not be that same guy.
Because initially I was actually speculating that Colin Lamb and Dick Hardcastle could have very well been the suspect.
Yes, no. Usually, the way Agatha Christie writes is that if there is an inspector helping Poirot, he's never implicated. The only time that ever happened really was Roger Ackroyd, and that wasn't even really a.
It was
a doctor.
It was from their point of view.
I don't want to go too far into that.
But then again, you never know when it comes to a mystery writer. There is always the opportunity for that curveball. Agatha Christie may have never touched upon it, but we have no idea whether or not she would have touched upon it.
This one had a couple curveballs, but not those kinds of curveballs. Like this one was more, there's a bunch of people. Some live in the same area as the blind woman. Some of them come from the company that the blind woman supposedly had called for, which she actually didn't. It was just a bunch of family-related stuff, and it all kind of loops back to exactly where it started in the beginning.
I think in comparison to the other books, I found the twists in this one to be a little bit more, I don't want to say more enjoyable, because I really loved, and then there were none, and I really loved Murder on the Orient Express, but this one was just a different twist. I'm sitting here thinking, okay, it's that Sheila girl that did it, or it's this person that did it, and or the blind girl that did it. Those were my two original oh, it's got to be them. And then the whole thing kind of
this is spoilers are allowed, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So Pep Marsh was implicated at the end.
Yes, but wasn't it the guy was the dad who was the sister
essentially
of
Poirot has
this
to solve
person?
two things.
It was different.
It was ultimately Mrs. Bland.
There were two things that had to be solved. One of them had to do with the wartime letters and that kind of stuff. The other was who caused the murder in the first place. There were two different things Poirot had to figure out in this, and it kind of connected together at the end.
I would say
which
that,
happened a lot more in
I
her
would
later
say that
years.
this was a little bit weaker than Orient Express, and
I agree.
then
I
there
just
were
like
none.
that it had a kind of a different twist because with those other two, like, you know, you had that one person and it was for me, they were a little bit more straightforward. Whereas this one I feel like took a really big jug handle and then came back around. So, and I kind of enjoyed that a little bit just because to me it was just something different. And I haven't read, you know, a ton of her books. This is my third book reading by Agatha Christie. So, you know, maybe there are other books that are like that too, but
This
I
is
just
my
thought it
fourth.
was like a nice, something different.
I've read most of the...
I think that this was stronger than Roger Ackroyd on the basis that this was not Roger Ackroyd was very predictable. I guessed it immediately.
A lot of Agatha Christie's stuff around this time period were also those kinds of stories where they were not straightforward, which is why I wanted to bring that question up at the beginning. You've got Mirror Cracked from 1962. You also have the Big Four. I forget when the Big Four came out, but it was a later one as well. Endless Night's another one that's not straightforward either. And of course, Curtain. If you've ever, you probably shouldn't read Curtain until you read all the Poirots. But Curtain's got a pretty big twist in it as well, which I'm not going to spoil because it is so big that I
It'd
don't
be in
want
my
to.
greatest interest to read them in order.
Or at least as close to order as possible,
Yes.
because some of them just aren't available anymore. But they do get more like this, like more not confusing, but more convoluted. It seems as though you're going on a goose chase and you come back. The Hollow is another one. Agatha Christie really started out in her earlier books. I believe they were more straightforward. Then later on, she tried new things. Some in good taste, some in not. You know, I don't think it's in bad taste, but I don't think it's in great taste either. I think it's just another one of her works. It just happens to be that it happens to be probably my favorite from this early 60s Agatha Christie time period.
I would say that her strongest was earlier on. When Poirot...
They're also much more straightforward.
When there's
earlier.
more, when we see more Poirot, I think that it's a better mystery. And Then There Were None is a standalone. I still think that it is just the way that it's crafted.
if we look here, her first one, Mysterious Affair at Styles, was 1920. So that Ackroyd was 26. Peril at Endhouse was 32. You mentioned Murder on the Orient Express, that's 34. ABC Murders was 35. That's probably one of her best works. You can see all these ones from like
Then There Were None is 39.
39. So you've got all the really straightforwards here. But if you got to fast forward to 1963 in order to get to the Clocks, which is a much later. It's definitely her later stuff, and then of course the Curtain eventually was published in 1975. It was definitely on the tail end of Christie's era, and I think you can see the changes between, which is why, for all you gladiators here, part of the reason I suggested this particular Christie was because it is later, and I wanted to see what you guys thought of could compare and contrast something like Roger Ackroyd to The Clocks, which came 20 years later.
I know,
Yeah,
based
20,
on
30
the
years later.
other two that I read, which obviously are earlier works, I enjoyed them much more than I enjoyed this one. Not saying that this one is bad by any means. I still very much enjoyed it, but if I had to rank the three, this one would be number 3.
I think this and Roger Ackroyd would be somewhat on the same footing for me. I think that the struggle comes with the fact you don't see as much Poirot. You saw probably a little bit more in Roger Ackroyd. I think that Colin Lamb even admitted himself, and others had admitted, that he still, actually, come to think of it, doing this was not his thing, because he ended up quitting his job anyway to get into marine biology.
You mean Colin?
Yeah, Colin.
Well, Colin was Sheila Webb's boyfriend.
That develops a sense of bias where...
That's why,
he's more
I can
involved.
understand why or was it you? One of you said that you said Colin Lamb may have been implicated. You thought that Colin Lamb might have been implicated. That was you, right? That said that. You can immediately understand, there's probably a motive there, and we already know that Sheila Webb has been implicated based off of.
Were they dating before this book? Because I was under the impression that they didn't know each other at the beginning of this book, and then
They didn't. No,
started
they
dating.
didn't. They
Okay.
didn't. I'm talking about the way it ended up.
Yeah. Okay, I was gonna say I wanted to make sure because.
No, they got no. There's kind of like a romantic subtext.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit... The fact that takes place is... I mean, depending on how it's executed. But
It actually kind of reminded me a little bit of like Watson's story in Sherlock Holmes, how he like suddenly has the love interest, and that's I
But
was like, is
Watson
she
had-
trying to go for like the guy helping the genius has a love interest?
He's
Just
been
like
around
we
for
did.
quite some time, though, before
Yeah.
it happened. Very often, they'll find that it's time to put a love interest in, so we gotta get
That's what I was saying. I was like, maybe she just felt that, like, I don't know. I just got a very Watson vibe from it.
For those of you out there who have seen the Poirot British television series.
Oh, I've actually seen some of it.
Oh, okay. So I had it on BritBox, but you'll notice that there's a lot more. It's more focused on that love interest than it is in the book. I think that's because you have to have something visual to latch on to. But we're talking about the book, so.
And as the love interests are always they're
Tricky
often
because
will
you
take
could put
center
them
stage
in
on
there.
those.
You could put them in there and they just don't fit, or they could fit, or whatever.
You want to say anything, Larry?
Yeah, don't put it in there unless it's going to serve the story somehow, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
The only
agree.
way it serves the story is to basically make Sheila Webb like more of a character where she has to remind herself that it isn't her fault. Like there's someone there for her, even though everyone thinks she did it. That's the only real reason you put Colin there. And technically speaking, you could have used another character, maybe. That's what I think. It's really only there to just ease her fears of people not liking her because she.
Yeah.
You get his point of view. It's either you get overseeing narrator or you get Colin Lamb's narrative.
Because Colin Lamb was only there by chance, if you think about it. At the very beginning of the book, he was right outside Pedmarsh's house when he was just screaming.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he says that a few times, that he was just simply a passerby. Like, he just happened to be there.
Which is another reason why I understand why you thought he might have been implicated, because he was there.
Yeah, him.
Right.
Yeah, I wish they kind of explained, like, maybe why he was walking by.
I think he was.
Like,
I
maybe.
think he was going to sell something.
Did anyone at any point figure out who it was, or
Like I said, I had originally thought it was either Sheila or, what's her name?
Pedmarsh.
Yes, that's it. I don't know. I think it was around, like, chapter 12. I was like,
I read this book years ago, so I already know who it was. This was just a reread for me. I
Right.
can't remember exactly what I thought.
I thought either Colin Lamb or Dick Newcastle, especially when Poirot brought them in to the hotel room and he was.
So you actually didn't get it right.
No, I didn't get it. Right.
Interesting, because like the last three Christies, like you were pretty sure who it was.
Not this time.
Then again, Roger Ackroyd, I knew exactly right from the beginning.
Yeah, so did I.
Orient Express, somewhat, and then there were none was the curveball.
see,
I
I
thought
felt,
you
and
thought it
then there
was-
were none. I figured that one out.
Well, yeah, I figured. I told you the light switch example. I mean, that gave it away for me.
Because I remember, and then there were none. I remember reading the line about a red herring, and I remember taking a class in criminology about what, and
What
I
a red
remember
herring
going
is.
what over a red herring was, and I was like, oh, it's that one, and it was like that click moment. And Murder on the Orient Express, it was like by the end, just before it was revealed, I was like, could it? No. And then I like dismissed it completely, and then I was like, oh my god, like of course.
I wanted to point out with the clocks is that the way it is set up, however, I think is one of the best. Like not necessarily the follow up, but how it's actually set up is actually one of Christie's most clever. Because you have a body of someone we don't even know. Tags are sewn out, we don't know who it is, and you've got 4 clocks in the room, and you would think, oh, those clocks are probably there for a reason. But one of them is actually important because we find out that Sheila's first name happens to be Rosemary later. You have those clocks, you have the dead person, you have in a blind person's house, and it's like all set up beautifully. But I think once you have a setup that's strong, you have to make sure that you can close it. I'll admit, I don't think this is her best closure. It's not the worst. I know worse, but it's not her best either. But I think as she gets older, you get these more convoluted plots. I think she's A, getting older, and B, she's trying a little too hard.
I think she's trying to outdo her earlier works.
Which, that just never, that really doesn't happen often.
Yeah,
Yeah, the point too, you might just run out of ideas.
that too.
Well, this felt like a new idea. It just wasn't presented very well. It was okay, but it wasn't anything
Right.
special. I more just wanted to go for the clocks because I wanted to see what your guys' reaction was compared to the 20s, 30s, and 40s of it.
It is
think that's a
interesting
good,
when you go
good
later as well.
comparison.
Do we have any final thoughts?
It's good. It's not great. It's good. And I think that Agatha Christie, she will always be the queen of mystery. She
Yeah, I
will
wasn't
always be.
Blown away, but I wasn't disappointed. So I would say like right in the middle. I enjoyed it. I'm starting to.
She
love
certainly
Agatha
has a lot
Christie.
of. Yeah, she certainly has a lot
I
of.
would
better
like to
works.
read some more. How would we rate it? 0 to 5 stars, half stars permitted. Larry?
3 stars.
That's actually higher than I thought you were going to give it.
I'm actually going about the same 3 stars. Like I said, it didn't blow me away, but I wasn't disappointed. I felt it was very average. I liked the big, like you said, extra jug handle she took to get back to the plot, and it was something different. Overall, I'd say it was pretty average.
I'm going to give it a 2.5. It's not as good as some of her other stuff, but it's definitely better than, like, for instance, Elephants Can Remember, which came out in, like, 1972. I did not like that one at all. I don't like a lot of the Tommy and Tuppence stories. I'm not a fan of most of the Marple stories, honestly. That's just me. I know a lot of people out there like Marple, but it's definitely on the lower end of Poirot stories. But with her writing specifically, it's like in the middle. So I'm gonna go with 2.5. That's what I feel comfortable giving it.
I'm going to go 3 as well, because I think that it had strong sparks and clever interweaving, but I think that the fact that you didn't see as much of Poirot, the fact that Colin Lamb and Dick Newcastle, they were relatively weak as supporting inspectors.
Yeah, they're not like people you're going to remember.
Yeah, the fact that you could suspect that they were the ones that did it, just their attitude, they were very short and very enigmatic.
One last thing I wanted to say is that usually in the later stories, in the 50s, 60s, 70s stories, Poirot will always be assisted by someone who is the opposite personality type to him. That's usually, so obviously in Hardcastle, you saw he was completely opposite.
So my other thing too is, while I didn't necessarily think that they did it, I didn't like how Lamb kept going to Poirot and was like, well, can't you just give me the answer? Like, just tell me. Like, I mean, I understand he's a marine biologist, but if he's helping in an investigation, I feel like he's got some background in helping police with investigations, so maybe investigate instead of just, you know, it's like a kid going
He did a
to
little
the
bit of
teacher
that, but not
saying,
all.
hey, I can't pass this math test, give me the answers. And I don't know, that annoyed me a little
There
bit.
were some things he had to do that required him to be like investigative, but you're right, a lot of the times he also did like tried to find the answers verbally. By the way, I should go, oh!
Yeah, that's right,
Oh,
you're the only
wolf.
one.
Alrighty, if you are interested in reading the clocks, here is a copy.
This is a bedside bathtub, an armchair companion to Agatha Christie. You won't find this anywhere. Very unlikely to find it anywhere. Copyright date, it's in the 60s or 70s, but I actually found this at the Book Garden, which is located in Cream Ridge, New Jersey. George is the owner, very nice man, and his wife as well. They had this book there and wanted to say it's been very helpful with the research I've had to do with Agatha Christie, me being a huge Agatha Christie fan. Luckily, this came out after she died, so everything is in here. It's not like it's missing anything.
Yeah.
Then it has like there's stuff about the movies, stuff about the books, stuff about the TV shows. Well, not the recent one, but
Which, I just want to bring up, those who want to watch the old TV shows, I'm pretty sure it's on Netflix. That's how I started watching it.
the one I watched is on BritBox.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's like the same one.
The one I
They just happen to have it.
the
And I was
one I
like,
see is stars David Suchet as Poirot. Also has Hastings in it, and Chief Inspector Japp is in a lot of stories. As I finish talking about the clocks, we're going to have a little bit of a downpour going on behind us. I think that's an appropriate way to end our episode of Literary Gladiators.
Be sure to join us next time. Be sure to join us next time on another episode of Literary Gladiators. For now, keep reading.
Keep reading.
Hi everybody, this is Jesi from Literary Gladiators, and on our next session we will be discussing Walt Whitman's O Captain, My Captain. I hope you guys can check it out and really appreciate a great work by a great man. Don't forget to support us on Patreon if you like what you see, so that way you can continue seeing wonderful, amazing discussions.